The first emergency call I ever made in my life was to my mother, and the last emergency call she would ever make in hers was to me. That isn't an accident. That isn't luck. That's what a bond looks like when it's been built brick by brick for 54 years, one quiet, unglamorous act of love at a time. Margaret O'Sullivan was not a complicated woman. She never tried to be. She was the kind of mother who hauled her own folding chair to every single Pee-wee football game I played in the freezing Boston drizzle. The kind who packed peanut butter sandwiches into brown paper bags until I was 15 and too proud to admit I still wanted her to. The kind who stayed awake every single time I stumbled in past midnight, not to lecture me, not to scold, but because she physically couldn't close her eyes until she heard the front door click and knew her son was under her roof again. That was her. That was always her, from the first memory I had to the last. Love in her house was never a word people threw around at the dinner table. It was an action, quiet, daily, performed without applause, without ever keeping score. When my father died 12 years ago, on a Tuesday morning in early November, one of those Boston mornings, where the sky looks like wet cement and the harbor smells like rust and cold salt, she didn't collapse. She didn't sob in public. She grieved the way she did everything else in her life, with her spine straight and her voice steady. She sold the second car to pay the funeral expenses and didn't bother to tell me until it was already done and the check had cleared. She ran that little house on Beacon Street on a fixed Social Security income, and somehow, impossibly, she still managed to put a hot Sunday supper on the table for any neighbor, any cousin, any grieving widow who happened to wander in. Not once in 12 years did she pick up that phone and say she was struggling. Not once did she ask me for a single dollar. Not a ride, not a grocery run, nothing. So you have to understand, when Margaret O'Sullivan called me at 7:41 on a Wednesday morning in January and whispered that her chest felt wrong, I didn't pause. I didn't calculate the traffic. I didn't weigh my schedule against hers. Because 54 years of that woman's love doesn't produce a son who hesitates. It produces a son who moves. Instantly. No conditions. No questions. What 54 years of love does not prepare you for is the person standing between you and the front door. Hold on a second before we go any further. My name is Daniel O'Sullivan. I'm 53 years old. I coach youth hockey on Saturday mornings at the community rink in Dorchester, and for the last 11 years, I have been the kind of husband who genuinely believed that keeping the peace was the same thing as actually having peace in his home. I was wrong about that. It took me way too long to figure it out, but I got there in the end, and that's what this story is about. And listen, if you're hearing this from somewhere in the world right now, drop a comment and tell me where you're watching from. Hit the like button. Subscribe if you haven't yet. This is going to be a ride, I promise you that. Now let me back up to that Wednesday. It was January 15th, 7:41 in the morning. I remember the exact minute because I was standing in my kitchen on Commonwealth Avenue, staring at the coffee maker, watching the drip come out slow and lazy, like even the coffee knew it wasn't ready for whatever the day had planned. My phone lit up on the granite countertop. Mom. I picked up on the second ring the way I always did. Danny. Her voice came through thin. Papery thin. Not her voice. Margaret O'Sullivan did not do thin voices. This was a woman who had survived a husband dying, a 2008 market crash that wiped out half their savings, and a full hip replacement surgery without ever once asking for a ride or a meal or a shoulder. Ma, you okay? I didn't want to bother you, honey. And there it was. 83 years old, chest pains happening inside her body, and still apologizing for existing on somebody else's time. How bad is it, Ma? Just tight, she whispered. And my left arm. It keeps going kind of numb. Silence. Ma. I'm probably being silly. Ma, stop. I'm coming right now. I hung up. I stood frozen in that kitchen for exactly 3 seconds. 3. And in those 3 seconds, a checklist ran through my head like a freight train. My truck, my 2018 Ford F-150, was sitting 12 miles away at Mahoney's garage on Dorchester Avenue. Transmission work. They'd called Tuesday evening and said it wouldn't be ready until Friday at the earliest. Okay. Think, Danny. Think. My wife's car. Laura's silver Lexus RX, sitting plump and polished in the driveway. Full tank of premium gas. She had filled it Monday evening on her way home from Pilates. And Laura herself? She was upstairs. I could hear the shower running. That famous 40-minute shower she took every single morning like she was a movie star, getting ready for the red carpet. And right here I want to pause for a second, because this is the moment that everything in my life hinged on. Right here. If you've ever had one of those moments where you can feel a hinge turning in real time but you don't know which direction it's swinging yet, you know exactly what I'm talking about. I walked to the bottom of the stairs. Laura. The water kept running. Laura. The shower cut off. A long, heavy silence. What? And it wasn't the what of concern. It was the what of annoyance. The what of this better be important. I need to borrow your car. My mother's having chest pains. Numbness in her left arm. I need to drive her to Mass General. I'll be back in a few hours. Nothing. Not the silence of someone thinking. The silence of someone who had already decided, and was just picking her words. She appeared at the top of the stairs 30 seconds later. Towel wrapped around her head, white bathrobe knotted at the waist, face completely, coldly composed. Danny, I can't today. Laura, Ma is having chest pains. Her left arm is numb. I heard you, she said. She leaned against the doorframe and folded her arms like she was about to negotiate a real estate deal. Call an ambulance, Danny. She doesn't like ambulances. You know that. She had a bad experience when Dad. Then call somebody else. She was already half turning back toward the bedroom. I have that dinner tonight with Pamela and the book club girls, and I have a full calendar today. I'm not going to spend my entire day stuck in some ER waiting room. And I stood there, completely still, my hands still resting on the banister. And let me just stop right here and say something. If you're listening to this, and something inside your chest is getting tight, if you're remembering a moment when somebody you loved looked at you and made it clear that you were asking for too much, that your pain or your family's pain was an inconvenience on their schedule, you are not alone. A lot of us have lived a version of this exact moment. I know how it feels. It's like the floor tilts 2 degrees and suddenly you realize the house you've been living in isn't the house you thought it was. Laura. My voice came out softer than I expected. Her left arm is going numb, Laura. She stopped halfway through the door, turned, and she looked at me with an expression I will remember in full, vivid color on the day I die. Not worry, not even guilt. Inconvenience, pure and simple inconvenience. She's your mother, Danny, she's not mine. And then a pause that felt like a cliff. Figure it out, figure it out. She closed the bedroom door behind her. It didn't slam. That was somehow worse. A slam would have meant emotion. A slam would have meant she cared enough to be angry. She just clicked the door shut gently, like I had told her we were out of paper towels. Like my 83-year-old mother's left arm going cold and dead was a minor logistical headache she didn't have space for in her calendar. I stood at the bottom of those stairs for one more second. Just one. And then I pulled my phone out of my pocket. Frank Russo. 4 houses down on Commonwealth Avenue. Retired Boston firefighter. 69 years old. Drove this beat-up but spotless 2010 Toyota Camry that he washed every Saturday morning like it was his baby. Frank was the kind of guy who still answered the phone by saying, "This is Frank," in a voice like a radio announcer. He'd known my mother for 23 years. He had carried a pall at my father's funeral. First row, left side. He picked up before the second ring finished. "Danny, what's happening, brother?" "Frank, I need a favor. Ma's having chest pains. Numbness down her left arm. My truck's at Mahoney's. Laura's car isn't available. Can you take us to Mass General?" Silence for exactly 0 seconds. "I'll be in your driveway in 4 minutes, pal." That was it. No questions. No conditions. No dinner reservations to rearrange. 4 minutes. And let me say this. If you are lucky enough in this life to have a Frank Russo on your street, A neighbor who picks up on the first ring and says yes before you finish the question. You hold on to that person tighter than you hold on to family members by blood, because blood will sometimes disappoint you. But the people who show up, they are your real family. I called Ma back immediately. Ma, I'm on my way. Frank is driving us. You don't need to do a thing. Just unlock your front door, sit down on the couch and breathe. Danny, I hate being a bother. Ma, sit down. A little laugh. Weak, but real. Okay, baby. Frank pulled up in 3 minutes and 28 seconds. I counted everyone. The drive from my mother's house on Beacon Street to Mass General Hospital on Fruit Street took 11 minutes with the lights. Ma sat in the back seat with me, her tiny hand wrapped inside both of mine, wearing her good blue wool coat like she was going to a Sunday Mass, because that's the kind of woman she was. If you were going to the hospital, you dressed with respect. She kept apologizing the entire way. Frank, I feel just awful pulling you away from your morning. Margie, please. I was doing the crossword and losing. You saved me from humiliation. She actually laughed. An 83-year-old woman with a cardiac event happening inside her chest laughed. And I looked out the window at the Boston morning going by. The brick brownstones, the cold gray Charles River in the distance, the smoke coming up from the steam vents in the street. And I felt two things at exactly the same time. Gratitude for Frank. And something else. Something colder and quieter and deeper underneath that was starting to harden around Laura's name. I didn't examine it yet. I just let it sit there. I would come back to it. Mass General was busy for a Wednesday morning. We checked into the ER at 8:28. A nurse named Yolanda, strong arms, no-nonsense eyes, the kind of woman who had seen every possible shade of human crisis and wasn't rattled by a single one of them, got Ma into a room in under 15 minutes. The doctor on call was a tall, quiet man named Dr. Peter Chen. Round glasses, careful hands. He didn't rush his words, which I appreciated more than I can say. Mrs. O'Sullivan, he said, I want to run an EKG, check your cardiac enzymes, do some blood work. At your age, with these symptoms, we absolutely do not take chances. Ma looked over at me. Her eyes asked me a question she didn't want to say out loud. Should I be scared, Danny? Ma, I said, you do exactly what the doctor tells you to do. She nodded. And then she reached up with her thin, spotted hand and cupped my cheek. You came, she whispered. And the way she said it, like she had not been entirely sure that I would, nearly unraveled me right there in that hospital room. Ma, I said, I will always come. I will always come. She patted my cheek twice with those hands that had packed 1,000 brown bag lunches, closed her eyes, and lay back. I sat in that waiting room for 2 hours and 35 minutes. Hard plastic chair, fluorescent lights buzzing, a TV mounted up in the corner playing some morning talk show on mute. I drank the worst coffee of my adult life from a machine near the elevators, and I didn't taste one single sip. And here's the part that still catches in my throat. Laura did not text me. Not once. Not even a, hey, let me know how she is. Not even a question mark. At 11:02, Dr. Chen came through the double doors to find me. Mr. O'Sullivan, your mother experienced what we classify as a mild cardiac event, not a full heart attack. Her body was warning her. We want to keep her overnight for monitoring, adjust some medications, run a stress test in the morning. But she's stable. 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 The word landed in my chest like a piece of good news dropped from the sky. He smiled just slightly. She's also asking if there's cable television in her room. I actually laughed. In that moment, I actually laughed. That's her, I said. Give us 20 minutes to get her settled. I sat back down and put my elbows on my knees and stared at the green hospital floor tile. Figure it out. That's what Laura had said. Figure it out. While she dried her hair. While she drove to Newbury Street for her lunch with the book club ladies. While she sipped white wine and passed the breadbasket across a candlelit table. While my mother's heart sent out distress signals in a hospital bed. Figure it out. I had figured it out. All right. I pulled out my phone and called Frank, who had stayed parked in the Mass General lot the entire morning like the man he was. She's stable, Frank. Thank God, brother. He meant it. Frank, thank you for Danny. His voice got firm but gentle. Stop thanking me. That's what people do. And I let those 3 words sit in the cold air of that waiting room. That's what people do. And I thought, well, some people do. I stayed with Ma until a little after 4. We watched half a game show together, this time with the sound on, and she beat me twice at a made-up word game she invented on the spot, using hospital supplies and New England town names. She was sharper on her worst day than I was on my best. Always had been. At 3:48, right before I kissed her forehead and left, she reached up and took my hand again. Daniel. Her voice had shifted. The thin, papery voice from the morning was gone. This was her other voice. The one she used when something serious was coming. Yeah, Ma. Laura didn't come. It wasn't a question. I didn't answer right away. She had dinner plans, I said. Daniel. Just the name. That was all. She didn't need more. I looked at her. 83 years old. Blue coat folded with military precision over the chair beside her, eyes clear as river water. She went to dinner, Ma. I said it quietly. With her friends. The words dropped into that hospital room like stones into a deep, still well. Ma didn't gasp. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't say a single word about Laura O'Sullivan. She just nodded slowly, turned her head toward the window, and watched the late Boston afternoon light fall gold and tired across the Charles River. She didn't speak again, but I saw something move across her face. Something quiet, something deliberate, something that looked a whole lot like a decision being made, right there in front of me. I kissed her forehead at 4:01. I walked out of Mass General into the freezing Massachusetts air. Frank was waiting at the curb. We drove back down Storrow Drive in comfortable silence. And somewhere along the way, with the bare oak trees going by and the wind pushing dead leaves across the road like the world was shedding something it didn't need anymore, I realized I wasn't angry at Laura. I was done. And let me tell you something from my own experience here, because I've thought about this moment 1,000 times since. Anger is a loud, hot, messy emotion. Anger makes noise. Anger slams doors. But being done? Being done is silent. Being done is cold and clear and organized. Being done is what happens after anger has burned through everything it had to burn. And when you reach being done with somebody, you don't come back from it. Not really. If you're listening to this right now, and something in your own life just flickered at those words, I want you to sit with that feeling for a second. Don't push it away. Sometimes the most honest feeling you have is the one you've been avoiding for years. If you're still with me, do me one small favor right now. Hit that subscribe button. It's free, it takes 2 seconds, and it genuinely means everything to those of us telling these stories. Drop a comment with where you're watching from, and what time it is. I love reading where these stories are landing in the world. All right. Some people spend their entire lives making withdrawals from a relationship they never once bothered to put a deposit into. Laura had been overdrawn for years. Thursday morning, January 16th. 6:57 in the morning. I woke up before the alarm. And when you wake up before the alarm, you know something is sitting on your chest that sleep couldn't shift. I lay there on my side of the mattress. The left side. Always the left. 11 years of marriage. And I still slept like I was leaving space for somebody who had never actually arrived. I stared at the ceiling. Laura was still asleep next to me. Hair spread out across her pillow, breathing deep and untroubled, one hand tucked under her chin, completely at peace. The woman could sleep through a hurricane. I got up quietly, went downstairs, made coffee. Yes, with the loud grinder. And no, I didn't feel one flicker of guilt about the noise. She chose dinner with Pamela over my mother's numb left arm. She could survive a little coffee grinder. I sat at the kitchen table and watched the gray Boston morning push itself through the window over the sink. My phone was face down on the table. I flipped it over. No missed calls from Mass General. No news was good news. At 7 in the morning I thought about Ma, about the way she had looked in that hospital bed, so small against the pillow. Her good blue coat folded up on the chair like she had dressed up for the occasion of being sick. about the way she touched my face and said you came like she had genuinely not been sure. You came. 2 tiny words. 83 years of unconditional love compressed into 2 syllables. And they nearly broke me all over again, sitting there at that kitchen table with a coffee cup going cold in my hand. She had always come for me, every single time, every birthday, every broken arm, every speech in school, every bad decision, every heartbreak, without a question, without a condition. The very, very least I could do was come for her. I was on my 2nd cup when I heard Laura on the stairs. She walked into the kitchen in her robe, glanced at me, glanced at the coffee pot, glanced back at me. You made coffee, she said. Every morning for 11 years, I said. Amazing that it still surprises you. She poured herself a cup and leaned against the counter. There was a beat of silence. That specific, heavy kind of silence that only married people recognize. The kind that's waiting for somebody to bring something up. Finally, she did. How is Margaret? Margaret, not your mom, not Ma. Margaret. Like she was a co-worker Laura had met once at a Christmas party and half remembered. Stable, I said. Mild cardiac event. They're keeping her another 24 hours for observation. She repeated the words slowly, like she was tasting it. Another silence. How was dinner? I asked. She blinked. Just once. But I caught it. It was fine, she said carefully. Danny, I want you to know that yesterday was really complicated for me. Complicated. I let that sit. Your mother-in-law's heart was misfiring. And you were at a restaurant on Newbury Street eating a kale salad. But sure, Laura. Complicated. Danny, she said. And I said her name back, the way my mother had said mine in the hospital the night before. Flat. Final. Laura. She stopped. I'm not doing this right now, I said. I'm just trying to explain. I know. I rinsed my mug and set it on the drying rack. I heard you yesterday the first time, at the bottom of those stairs. I picked up my jacket off the chair. My keys. My spare truck key, because the Ford was still at Mahoney's, and I walked toward the front door. Where are you going? Laura said. To see my mother, I answered. I didn't turn around. Frank drove me again. He didn't ask a single question. He didn't push. He didn't offer an opinion. Just drove. One hand on the wheel. An old country station playing low on the radio. Hank Williams. George Jones. Music from the decade he grew up in. There is a specific kind of friendship that doesn't need to be filled with words to function. Frank and I had it. We parked at Mass General at 8:41. I'll be here when you're done, he said. Frank, you don't have to. Danny. He looked at me over the tops of his reading glasses. I'll be here. And I want you to remember something, because this is one of those pieces of life advice I wish somebody had given me at 25. Make a note of who shows up. Write it down somewhere permanent. In a journal. In your phone. Somewhere. Because the people who show up for you without being asked, without a reward, without a thank you card, those are the people you rearrange your entire life around. Those are the ones worth protecting. Ma was sitting up when I got to her room, color back in her cheeks, thin voice gone completely. She was already wearing her own nightgown, the pale pink one with little lilacs on it, because she had refused the hospital gown on night 1, and honestly, who was going to fight her? She had her reading glasses perched on her nose, and a crossword puzzle book open across her lap. 7 letters, she said without even looking up. The second I stepped through the door. Betray. I stopped in the doorway, stared at her. She peered up at me over the rims of those glasses with the flattest, driest face I have ever seen on a human being. For the crossword, Daniel. I laughed so hard the nurse passing by in the hallway poked her head in to check on us. Perfect, I said, dropping into the chair beside the bed. Perfect. She counted the boxes, wrote it in with her careful handwriting, nodded with deep satisfaction. You always were the smart one, she said. Ma, I'm your only child, still the smart one. We sat like that for a long while. Easy. Quiet. That specific kind of quiet that only exists between 2 people who have loved each other long enough to not need to fill every silence with conversation. She finished 2 more clues. I drank the terrible hospital coffee and didn't complain. because being in that plastic chair, drinking something that tasted like punishment, sitting next to her, was exactly where I wanted to be, where I would always want to be. Then she closed the crossword book, set it on the bedside table, folded her hands carefully in her lap, and here we went. "I want to call Vincent this morning," she said. "Vincent Moretti. Vincent R. Moretti, Esquire. Attorney at law, Suffolk County, 33 years in practice. Italian-American guy from the North End. He had handled my father's estate when he passed. He had drafted my mother's will 6 years ago. Sharp man. Methodical. The kind of lawyer who listened twice as much as he talked, which in my experience is a rare and beautiful thing. I kept my voice very level. "Okay, I've been thinking," she said. "Since last night. Ma, you don't have to. Daniel Joseph O'Sullivan. Full name. All three. I had not heard all three of those names strung together since I was 16, and came home an hour and 10 minutes past curfew on a Saturday night in 1989. Do not finish that sentence." I closed my mouth. She looked at me with those clear, steady, watercolored eyes. The Boston morning light was coming through the window behind her, soft gray with just a hint of gold breaking through at the edges, and in that light she looked younger somehow. Or maybe she looked exactly like the woman she had always been, exactly like the Margaret O'Sullivan who had packed my lunch and sat up waiting for me, and sold a car in silence, and made Sunday roast beef for 35 years on Beacon Street. My mother, the most constant, stable, unwavering thing in my entire life. "I have worked my whole life, Daniel," she said. "Your father and I, we scrimped and we saved and we went without some more so that what we built would mean something, so it would land somewhere it mattered." A pause. "With people who showed up." I said nothing. I just listened. "Laura didn't show up, Daniel." "I know, Ma. Not just yesterday." She picked up the crossword book, not to work on it, just to hold something. "Not at your father's repast after the funeral. Not when I had that hip replacement in 2019, and needed rides 3 times a week to physical therapy for 6 weeks. Not Christmas Eve 2 years ago when I had the flu and you had to leave your own house to come bring me soup." She looked up. "And not yesterday, when my heart was failing." She went to dinner. Each one of those examples landed like a pebble, dropped into deep, still water, slow ripples, sinking, and every single one of them was true. Every single one of them I had silently excused for Laura, year after year after year. "I'm not angry, Daniel," she said, and the truly remarkable thing was, she wasn't. Her voice was even. Calm, steady as a hand on a Bible. "I'm just being accurate." She reached for her phone on the bedside table, unfolded a tiny piece of paper that had been tucked inside her glasses case. A phone number written in her neat, slightly shaky handwriting. Vincent Moretti, direct line. She had come prepared. My mother did not make impulsive decisions. Not ever. This had been building inside her for a lot longer than one hospital stay. "You want me to step out?" I asked. She considered it for a moment, then shook her head. "No, stay." And just that one word, stay. Everything inside me went still and deeply, wordlessly grateful. She dialed at 9:23 in the morning. He picked up on the second ring. "Vincent Moretti." "Vincent, it's Margaret O'Sullivan. I hope I'm not catching you too early." His voice warmed right up. "Mrs. O'Sullivan. Never too early for you. How are you? I'm calling you from Mass General, actually." Pause on his end. "I'm sorry to hear that. Is it serious?" "Serious enough to make me think very clearly," she said. And even there, even in a hospital bed, in a nightgown, the morning after a cardiac event, there was this extraordinary dignity in her voice. The kind of grace that cannot be faked. The kind that is built over 83 years of doing the right thing quietly, even when it costs you. "Vincent, I need to update my documents, my will specifically." Silence on his end. Professional silence. Absorbing, not stalling. "Of course, Mrs. O'Sullivan. Would you like me to come to the hospital?" "Today, if possible," she said. "I have very specific changes in mind. I can be there by 2 this afternoon." "Perfect." And she glanced over at me. "My son will be present." "Of course." I'll see you at 2. She hung up, set the phone down, picked up her crossword book again. Just like that, like she had not just altered the entire trajectory of my life. Like she had not just loved me in the deepest, most permanent, most legally binding way a mother can love a son. I sat there for a long moment, throat tight, eyes barely holding. "Ma," I said quietly, "you don't have to do this for me." She didn't look up from the crossword. "I'm not doing it for you, Daniel." She filled in a letter, deliberate, calm. "I'm doing it because I have earned the right to decide where my life's work goes. And I have decided." She looked up over those reading glasses. "Any other questions?" I had approximately 46. I asked exactly 0. "No, ma'am." "Good." She went back to her puzzle. "Now go find me something edible in that cafeteria. Whatever they keep bringing me on that tray tastes like a decision someone made that they immediately regretted." And for one full second, I just stared at her. This tiny, sharp, magnificent woman, in her own flowered nightgown, in a Boston hospital room, filling in crossword answers like the world owed her nothing, and she owed it everything. And I thought to myself, I have spent 53 years trying to be worthy of her. I hope I'm getting close. Vincent Moretti arrived at 1:57 in the afternoon. Charcoal gray suit, black leather briefcase, silver hair, close cropped. He shook my hand with real firmness, nodded at me the way one man acknowledges another when they both understand the weight of a room, and sat down across from my mother with a yellow legal pad and a Mont Blanc pen that probably cost more than my truck's transmission. I sat in the corner, silent, still, a witness. The conversation between them lasted 43 minutes. I'm not going to put every word of it in here. Some things deserve their privacy. But I will tell you this much. By the time Vincent Moretti clicked that pen closed and slid the legal pad back into his briefcase, the document that Laura O'Sullivan had been silently, quietly, patiently counting on for 11 years of marriage, had been fundamentally, irrevocably, and legally rewritten from top to bottom. The house on Beacon Street, which my mother owned outright, paid off in 2011. Daniel. The Vanguard investment accounts that my father had patiently built over 31 years of working as an electrician. Daniel. The jewelry, the furniture, the antique writing desk from my grandmother, the 1966 Ford Thunderbird, still running, still gleaming, that lived under a canvas cover in her garage, the car my father had spent 5 years restoring with his own hands on weekends, the car that still faintly smelled like his aftershave on warm days when you opened the garage door. Daniel. And $30,000 earmarked specifically for the Boston Animal Rescue League on Chandler Street, because Margaret O'Sullivan had volunteered there every second and fourth Saturday morning for 14 years. Because that is exactly the kind of woman she was. Laura O'Sullivan's name appeared in that document exactly 0 times. "Not my problem," she had said once. Turns out, correct. When Vincent stood to leave, he shook my hand once more at the door. "Your mother," he said quietly, looking back over his shoulder at her, already back to her crossword, already unbothered, already completely herself, is one of the sharpest people I have met in 33 years of practice. I looked over at her too. "Yeah," I said. "I know. I've always known." I left Mass General at 4:35 that afternoon. Frank was in the parking lot. He took one look at my face and didn't ask a single thing. Not searching for information, just checking that I was still upright. "Everything okay?" "Yeah," I said quietly. "Everything is exactly the way it needs to be." He nodded once. "Put the Camry in drive." We pulled out of the Mass General lot and headed back down Storrow Drive toward home. My phone was in my pocket, completely silent. Laura had not called once all day. She had no idea what had just happened. None. But she would. And now let me pause here and say something directly to you, if you're still with me. If you are listening to this, and you have ever been the person who has carried an entire relationship on your own back, who has apologized for the other person to your family, who has smoothed over rudeness, who has explained away cruelty, who has told yourself she just doesn't show affection the way my family does, or he's just stressed lately, listen to me. There is a specific moment in a lot of our lives when the explanations run out, when there is no more oxygen left in the excuse. And when that moment arrives, you do not have to make a decision right away. You don't have to blow up your life that same afternoon. But you do have to stop lying to yourself about what you have been living inside of. That's the first step. Friday morning, January 17th, 8:13 in the morning. I was standing at the front counter of Mahoney's garage on Dorchester Avenue when it started. My truck was finally ready. New transmission. Oil change that old Dennis Mahoney threw in for free because our sons had played pee-wee hockey together back in the mid-90s, and that's what neighborhood guys did for each other around here. A brand new set of wiper blades I hadn't even asked for. I was standing at the counter, signing the invoice, when my phone buzzed in my jacket pocket. Laura. I let it ring. Not out of any strategy. Not yet. I just genuinely didn't have anything to say to her. Nothing that would land the way it needed to land. Not yet. I slid the phone back into my pocket. Finished signing. Shook Dennis's hand. Walked out into the cold Boston morning. The air was sharp and clean and completely honest in a way I hadn't noticed in a very long time. I started the truck. Let it warm up. Sat there watching my breath fog up the windshield. Thinking about Ma. About bringing her home to Beacon Street where she belonged. About getting her settled into her kitchen with a pot of tea and her crossword and her dignity fully, completely intact. That was what today was about. Not Laura. Not her phone calls. Not any of it. Today was about bringing my mother home to the house she had earned. My phone buzzed again. Laura, then a third time. A fourth. A fifth. A sixth. Something had happened. She knew. I pulled out of Mahoney's lot and drove to Mass General. Ma was ready when I got there. 8:53 in the morning. Blue wool coat. Small overnight duffel bag packed with military precision. Yolanda the nurse walking beside her. Another nurse behind them with the mandatory discharge wheelchair. Hospital policy. Non-negotiable. Ma had already argued and lost with characteristic Irish grace. She stood up from that wheelchair the instant the automatic doors slid open to the outside world. I can walk to my son's truck under my own power, she announced, to absolutely no one in particular and to everyone within 40 feet. I had a cardiac event, not a personality transplant. Yolanda laughed. A real laugh. Not the professional kind. She took Ma's small hand in both of hers and just held it for a long moment. You take care of yourself, Mrs. O'Sullivan. I always do, honey. And Ma squeezed her hand back. You're a good one, Yolanda. Don't let anybody tell you different. Yolanda pressed her lips together in that way people do when they're fighting tears. Nodded. Stepped back. Even walking out of a hospital, my mother left people better than she had found them. That was just who she was. I held the passenger door of the truck open. She climbed in slowly, carefully, but on her own, which mattered more to her than any pill, any prescription, any instruction on any discharge paper. Her independence was the last territory she would ever surrender, and we both knew it completely. I closed the door, walked around, got in. She looked down at my phone, sitting face up in the center cup holder, lighting up over and over again. Laura. 14 missed calls before 9 in the morning. Ma didn't say a single word about it. She just buckled her seatbelt and smiled faintly out the passenger window, like a woman who had made a decision and was entirely at peace with it. I got her home to Beacon Street first. The white colonial with the black shutters and the wrought iron railing was sitting quiet and familiar at the end of the block. The house where I had learned to ride a bike in the driveway, where I had done my math homework at the kitchen table, where my father had built a life with his own 2 hands, brick by patient brick, and had left it standing firm when he died. The big oak tree in the front yard had dropped almost all its leaves. The porch was swept clean. The welcome mat said hello in faded cursive letters that had been there so long that neither of us had really noticed them in years. But I noticed them today. I got her inside. I made her tea, the specific kind. Chamomile, bag steeped for exactly 4 minutes. A half teaspoon of honey, because she had told me once, decades ago, how she liked it, and I had never once forgotten. I checked the thermostat. I checked the fridge. I walked through each of her new medications from Dr. Chen one by one, reading the labels out loud while she listened, cupping the hot mug in both hands. Daniel, this one is for blood pressure. Twice a day with food. She was watching me from across the small kitchen table. The table where she had made every birthday cake I had ever had. Where she had helped me through algebra when I was 13 and wanted to throw the textbook out the window. Where she had sat the morning after my father died and held my hand without saying a single word. Because some moments in life do not need words. Sit down, she said softly. I sat. She reached across that kitchen table and covered my hand with both of hers. Her hands were small, warm, thin-skinned now, spotted with age. The hands that had packed my lunches, that had buttoned my winter coats, that had waved to me from the bleachers at every single youth hockey game I had ever played through 13 cold New England winters. The hands that had held mine 2 days ago in the back of Frank Russo's Camry on the way to this same hospital. These hands had been showing up for me for 53 years. I need you to hear me, Daniel, she said. I'm listening, Ma. What I did yesterday. The will. I didn't do it to punish Laura. Her eyes were steady, clear, no anger in them, no bitterness. Just the truth, the way she had always delivered truth. Plain, warm, completely unmovable. I did it because it was the right thing to do. Because your father and I built something together, and it belongs with somebody who understands what building something together actually means. She squeezed my hand once. You understand that? I understood it. In my bones. And Daniel, she said, her voice dropping just slightly. Not softer, but more deliberate. I need you to think about your life. Not about the money. Not about any of this. She gestured vaguely at nothing, and at everything. I need you to think about whether you are happy, Daniel. About whether you are loved the way you actually deserve to be loved. She looked at me for a very long moment. Because you have been showing up alone for a very long time, baby. And a man like you, a man who shows up, deserves to have somebody standing right next to him when he does. The kitchen was completely still. Outside on Beacon Street, a car drove past slowly. Somewhere on the block, a dog barked twice and went quiet. The refrigerator hummed. The clock on the wall ticked. Everything she had just said was absolutely true. Every single syllable. My throat tightened. My eyes burned just slightly at the edges. I did not look away from her. Yeah, I said. My voice came out rough and quiet and completely honest. I know, Ma. She nodded once, slowly. Like that was exactly what she had needed to hear. Then she patted the back of my hand twice, the same way she had patted my cheek in the hospital 2 days ago, and let go. Good. She picked up her tea, took a sip, set it down. Now, are you going to answer that phone or not? My phone was buzzing on the wooden table between us. Laura. Call number 31. I looked at it. I looked at Ma. She raised one eyebrow. I picked up the phone, turned it face down against the wood. Let it keep buzzing until it stopped. Not yet, I said. The corner of her mouth moved just barely. Not yet, she repeated softly, like she was tasting the patience in the words. I will check on you tonight, Ma, and tomorrow morning, and every morning after that. She waved a small hand in the air. I know you will. I mean it, Daniel. She looked at me over her glasses, which she had put back on at some point without me noticing. I know you mean it. You have always meant it. I left Beacon Street at 1:14 in the afternoon. I drove home to Commonwealth Avenue, parked the truck in the driveway behind Laura's silver Lexus. Sat there for 1 full minute. I counted every second. 37 missed calls. 37 I went inside. Laura was in the living room, perched on the very edge of the cream-colored couch in her work clothes. Both hands wrapped around her phone like it was the only solid thing she had left in the world. She looked up the instant the door opened. Her eyes were raw, sleepless. Something in her face had shifted in a way I had not seen in 11 years of marriage. The careful, composed shell she wore like a second skin had cracked open, and underneath it was something that looked a whole lot like a woman who had spent the last 18 hours slowly, fully realizing exactly what she had done to herself. Good, said something very quiet in the back of my mind. Stay there a while. Daniel, she said, and she stood up immediately. I have been calling you all morning. I know, I said. I hung my keys on the hook beside the door, and I thought for a moment about Wednesday night, about Ma lying in that narrow hospital bed with monitor wires on her chest and an IV needle in her arm, about the EKG printout Dr. Chen had showed me, about the enzyme levels, about the measured, careful way he had told me her body had been warning her, and about Laura's dinner, about the candles on the table, about the breadbasket being passed from hand to hand down a long rectangular table on Newbury Street while my mother's heart stuttered in the dark. I let all of it sit in my chest for exactly 1 second. Then I looked at my wife. Did you know? Her voice cracked on the last word. About the will, did you know she was going to? No, Laura, I said. I did not know. I turned to face her fully. I found out the same way as everyone else. She pressed her fingertips to her mouth, composed herself. When she spoke again, her voice was quieter and more controlled, but underneath it, threaded through every single word like a wire pulled too tight, was fear. Real, solid, adult fear. The kind that finally shows up when consequences catch up to choices after a lifetime of dodging them. She removed me entirely, Danny. Vincent Moretti's office called my attorney to notify us the changes were filed. She took me out. Everything we were expecting, gone. Danny, do you understand what that means? Then talk to her. Her composure slipped a little further. Ask her to reconsider. Tell her it was a misunderstanding. Tell her I was on my way to the hospital. Tell her. You just what, Laura? She stopped. I took 1 step toward her. Not aggressive. Not angry. Just present. Completely. Quietly. Fully present in a way I had not been in years, because I finally had nothing left to protect. You just had dinner with Pamela and the book club, I said, while my mother was in a cardiac unit. While I was in a plastic waiting room chair under fluorescent lights drinking machine coffee that tasted like regret. A pause. While Frank Russo sat in a hospital parking lot for 3 hours because that is what people do. The color left her face slowly. Completely. Like water draining out of a glass. Margaret made her decision, I said. The same way you made yours. Clearly. Deliberately, and without asking anyone's permission first. Danny, please. She has spent 83 years showing up, I said. My voice did not rise. It didn't need to. For my father. For me. For every single person she has ever loved in her life. She has never, not one single time in 8 decades, chosen dinner over somebody who needed her. I looked at Laura for a long, quiet moment. She simply finally stopped expecting everybody else to do the same. The living room was absolutely silent. Laura looked at me, really looked at me, maybe for the first time in a very, very long time, and I watched something move across her face. Not just fear anymore, something deeper than fear. The specific kind of look a person gets on their face when they have finally, fully understood the exact size and shape of what they have lost. And it wasn't the money. It wasn't the house on Beacon Street. It wasn't the Thunderbird under its canvas cover in the garage. It was me. She had finally, fully understood that she had lost me. And the man standing in front of her in the living room, calm, clear-eyed, keys on the hook, heart finally at complete peace with itself, was not the same man who had stood at the bottom of those stairs on Wednesday morning still hoping she would say yes. That man was gone. He had walked out of this house in Frank Russo's Camry, and he had not come back. Her phone buzzed once in her hand. She looked down at it. My mother's name was on the screen. She looked back up at me, eyes wide, something that might have been hope flickering somewhere behind them, and I just looked back at her for exactly 1 second, and I felt it. The last thread of something I had been holding on to for 11 long years of marriage finally going slack, not with anger, with something much quieter than that, with release. I picked my keys back up off the hook. I'm going to go check on my mother, I said. I opened the front door. The cold Boston air hit me. Clean, honest, completely free. Oh, I said, turning back one final time. Laura was standing in the middle of the living room with her phone in her hand. My mother's name glowing on the screen. 38 calls worth of consequence written into every line on her face. I looked at her for 1 second, and I felt nothing but absolute, cloudless clarity. "You should probably answer that," I said, and I closed the door behind me, and I exhaled. The kind of exhale that comes from somewhere so deep in your chest you didn't even know you had been holding it for years. I stood on that front porch for just a moment. The January air hit my face. Cold, clean, honest. And something settled over me in that moment that I had not felt in years. Clarity, not anger, not bitterness, not the hot panicked rush of a man who finally snapped. Just clarity. The quiet, unmistakable clarity of a man who had finally, after years of telling himself things were fine, after years of smoothing over, after years of swallowing down, after years of sleeping on the left side of a bed leaving room for somebody who had never once moved toward him, finally seen his own life exactly for what it was. I had not been married for 11 years. I had been enduring for 11 years. There is a difference. There is an enormous difference. And standing on that porch in the Boston cold, with my mother's voice still in my ears and Laura's face still burning in my mind, I finally understood that difference all the way through. The hospital did not make me see it. My mother lying in that hospital bed with a cardiac event while her daughter-in-law passed the breadbasket on Newbury Street that did not plant a seed in me. It burned the whole field down and showed me exactly what had been growing there for 11 years. And here is what I want you to take away from this story, if you take anything at all. Because I've thought about it a lot. This story is not about a will. It isn't about a house on Beacon Street, or a 1,966 Thunderbird, or $30,000 earmarked for an animal shelter. This story is about the people who show up, and the people who don't, and learning, sometimes far too late, how to tell the difference. There's a lesson in here that I think applies to almost every single one of us who has ever loved somebody. This is what this teaches us. The worst mistake most of us make in long relationships is that we start grading on a curve. We start saying, well, she doesn't do this, but she does that. We start excusing the unforgivable because the alternative, which is admitting what you actually have, is too painful to face. So I want to leave you with this. Go home tonight, or tomorrow morning, and look honestly at the people in your life. Ask yourself a question. When things got hard last year, or last month, or last week, who showed up, and who made excuses? Write those names down. One column and another column. Because those columns tell you everything you need to know about your real life. Here in the United States, we talk a lot about freedom and independence, but we don't talk nearly enough about elder care, about the rights and dignity that our aging parents deserve. If you have a parent who is getting older, please, take the time today to make sure they have an updated will, a healthcare proxy, a power of attorney. In most states, these are simple documents you can set up with an estate attorney in an afternoon. There are also free legal aid resources for seniors in every state through the Area Agency on Aging. Look them up. Call them. This is one of the most loving things you can do for the people who raised you. And if you are in a marriage where you are the only one showing up, I am not going to tell you to walk out today. That's not my place. But I am going to tell you what somebody wise should have told me 10 years ago. Start paying attention. Stop making excuses. Start believing what you are seeing. Now, before we wrap up, I want to hear from you, because this is where you come in. Comment number 1 if you think Daniel did the right thing by walking out that door. Comment number 2 if you think Laura deserves a chance to make things right faster than he gave her. Comment number 3 if you have ever been in a situation where a family member showed up or refused to show up in a way that changed everything for you. And right underneath that, tell me where in the world you are watching from. What city, what country, and what time it is right now on your clock. I read every single one of these comments, and I absolutely love seeing where in the world these stories are landing. It really does mean the world to me. This is a fictional story inspired by common situations many families face, but 100% rewritten by me here in Boston to be original, to avoid reused content, and to bring you something honest. If this story moved you, please hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and tap the notification bell so you don't miss the next one. I'll see you on the next story. Take care of your people. And make sure the ones standing next to you are the ones who actually show up.